Welcome, fellow interpreters. Today we're going to talk about note-taking for consecutive interpreting, in particular, how to put the notes on the page in a specific layout, what I call the glance layout, so that your notes and the meaning will jump into your mind as soon as you glance at them when you're doing your interpretation. So let's get going. What we want to do is have our clients be super happy with the amazing consecutive that we do. We are able to stand up in front of a crowd or maybe on Zoom and listen to something for 5 or 10 minutes and give it back with all the details, all the names, numbers, etc. And we want our client to say, wow, that was amazing. So happy to have you here. And we were going to have you back at our next meeting. So what are the skills that you need to have to reach that level of consecutive? Of course, the main thing is to practice like crazy, but there's also a lot of technique that goes into it. And we're going to take a look at some of those skills. What we want, as I was saying, is for the speaker to say to us, as a Brit actually said to me once at the European Parliament. It was not actually a European Parliament meeting. It was a big NGO that was holding a meeting in the European Parliament building. And he said, yeah, I think you said that better than I did when I interpreted it in his speech into French, a passionate speech about the environment. And we want our customers to say that. We want to be in high demand, right? Because people know that you can do beautiful consecutive. And that makes it possible for you to charge the top price because your clients know that you are quality and you can bring home more days and more income every year for your family. So that's our whole purpose, right? And I'd like to say, please do stay till the very end because I'm going to have a gift for you. I'm going to have a little present. And actually, I have something already. I'm going to put it in the chat if I can figure this out. I've got a little course, a free course that I think some of you have taken already, but I'm going to just give you this little gift right now. And you can use this link to access a free course on symbols for note-taking. But I'm going to give you something else at the end, so please do stay until the end. I have a little gift for you. So there we go. I got that in there to remind myself to put it in the chat, and it's already in there. Great. So please have a notepad and a pen ready. We will be doing an exercise, and we are going to go over 3 main parts. We're going to talk about the method. What actually happens when we do interpretation? We're going to just take a look at that. I know that you're all interpreters and you know that, but it's helpful to make that explicit because it's going to come into play when we talk about the way we give feedback to colleagues when we're doing practice. Number 2, we're going to talk about how you practice to become an interpreter or to become proficient at consecutive with notes. For me, that was simultaneous. I went to interpreting school and I was not yet an interpreter. And I spent 1 year learning how to do consecutive. And that's how I learned how to be an interpreter, basically. So that's what I'm going to show you is that. And then thirdly, I want to show you a specific way of laying out the page, which is highly recommended, something that I learned back in the 80s and something that you can see taught in many universities here and there. I think it's pretty similar. So the method, let's start at this first part here. Okay, so, our clients and our friends and people who don't understand what we do, they think, well, when we hear a word, let's say we hear the English word table, they think, okay, we look at that up in a little dictionary in our minds and we come up with table. But actually what happens is we hear the word table. This is just an example. And we think of, okay, what does it mean this time? Does it mean that physical thing or does it mean something else? If we decide, yes, it does mean that physical thing, we will maybe come up with a word like table in French. It might be something else, but basically we are expressing that thing, that meaning in the target language. Sometimes, as we all know, what happens is the context is different. What's happening the word is being used in a different way. So we go to the meaning again. The light bulb represents the meaning, and then we express it, and it might be something like in French, it might be déposer une motion or présenter something, whatever the language may be. We will find the right way of saying it on the basis of what we understood, which is represented by the light bulb. So I'm sort of going through the method now first. And when we apply this method to note-taking for consecutive interpreting, we have two phases, right? We are listening to the original, that's the 1, 2 on the top. And the first thing we do is we understand what is meant. So for example, with table, we understand this time it's that wooden thing with 4 legs, or we understand as something else. And we form that understanding in our mind. And then we write. And this is important here because what I'm trying to get across is we don't generally write until we've understood what it means, right? So if it was table emotion, as opposed to let's set the table, I would write different notes, right? So we don't write, just blindly write a word. We write on the basis of the meaning. And then when we do the delivery of our interpretation, the notes are there to remind us of what we understood. So we don't blindly, again, just read off our notes. Our notes remind us of the meaning that we got the first time around, and then that's when we see it, number 3 there, and then we remember it, and then we say what we understood. That's why the arrow points to the light bulb, not to the notes. We are saying what we remember, not what we read on the page. So that's for the first part about the way interpreting works. Let's take a look now at what I'm calling the practice cycle. It's going to be in 4 parts. First of all, listen with a colleague to a speech or something. Then do your interpretation. Get feedback from your colleague, or maybe give feedback if it's your turn, and then use that feedback. So we're going to take a little closer look at these 4 parts. And I would like to say that, to be honest, to become close to professional, at least this was the case for me, it's going to take something like this, 2-hour sessions, 3 times a week over a period of about 8 months. And I have a little program here that I'd like to present. We got an 8-month program. You can see the months down on the left column, 1 through 8. And so for the first month or 2, I highly recommend that you have, well, for the first month, maybe no notes at all. And then maybe for the second month, start using a word or just a line, or maybe just a number to number off the points. And all the way through, your main purpose during this month, and actually all the way through, is listening discipline. The whole goal here is going to be how to maintain a top level of focused listening, all the while taking notes. And that's what really takes practice. So in the 3rd through the 8th month, you're going to, okay, I'm showing a length of your practice pieces. You'll be reaching up to maybe 8 minutes during your practice. You will, and during the end of these 8 months, you'll be moving on to, any topic at all. But again, you will be probably working mainly to maintain your listening discipline while actually writing something down. That's kind of the hard part. So moving on to each of these phases, I want to say in here also, I can put something in the chat for you, which is a link that will take you to a place where you can get all kinds of speeches. This is a really good, actually, this is a page on my own website, but what I've done here is gathered all of the websites that I use to find speeches. These buttons will take you to places where interpreters like us have recorded things, which are really very good for practice, because as interpreters, they've done it the right way. They're not reading, they are telling a story, and don't practice with read things in general. And anyway, so this is a quite useful little page, and so I'm going to give you that. So when you're listening with a colleague, that's the first phase. And then we said, yeah, right. So I've already got that. It's in the chat. You can also use the QR codes which will also take you to that page. So then number 2 is going to be when you do an interpretation. This is a little chart of the languages. An A language is your mother tongue. For me, that's English. A B language is your active acquired language. For me, that would be French. And then a C language is not active. You don't speak in that language generally when you're interpreting. And for me, that's Portuguese and Spanish, although that comes up. You'll end up speaking into those languages too, but I wouldn't do simultaneous into them. So you can practice by going from A to B and B to A, or from C to A, but you can also practice by going from A to A and from B to B. So for many of you, English would be a B, and when we practice, and we have a weekly practice that's going to start up again in February, we do English to English. And this is the way that it's often done, language neutral class. It works because you still go through everything the way you're supposed to. The process we described above, where you listen to something, you understand it, and then you put it in your own best words, the best way you as a professional can find to say it. Well, if you end up putting it back into the same language, it's still practicing the same process. So you can, during this listening and speaking practice and getting feedback, you can also go from A to A and from B to B. And so you need to get feedback, and you also need to give feedback. And I'd like to go over a little bit about how Danica Seleskovic, who is my mentor and a mentor for many people, there's something called the Seleskovic Prize. She's a great theoretician, etc. Anyway, she was the director of the school I went to in Paris, AZIT, in the 80s. And actually, I don't think she really liked me all that much. But, when you work with somebody that much, as somebody who's, really a great pedagogue, you end up admiring her, and I do. So anyway, she had recommendations about how to give feedback. First of all, give the valuation of the method. Is the person actually using the method we just described? In other words, going through actual understanding. Okay, I understand that sometimes we don't understand everything that the experts understand. That's obvious. So, for example, when a doctor says a disease and we interpret it into another word, of course, we don't understand everything that doctors understand about that disease. But we do understand that it is a disease, and we try to understand everything that we can. We're not going to just blindly work from word to word, right? It's going to sound very strange. And that's one of the reasons why we do this evaluation of the method here at this point, because you're going to do an overall evaluation. Does it sound good? Does it sound fluid? Would people have kept listening, or would they leave the room or start looking at their phones? You've got to have a good delivery. It needs to be an effective interpretation that will keep people's attention. So that's number 1. And all of this, again, is coming from what I learned from Seleskovic. And then 2, as linguists, we tend to concentrate on words, and that's okay. We do need to improve our language all the way through this process, but not at the expense of actually evaluating the process. And so that means looking at the substance. The substance is everything that the source language audience would get from any speech, any utterance. In other words, the names, the numbers, the arguments, the descriptions, the visualizations, but also the tone. Is it friendly? Is it angry? Is it whatever? And everything should come through. That's the substance. And then we're talking about how you do your critique. And then you take a look at the form and you help your colleagues say, well, you had the right idea. I can tell that you understood, but there's a better way to say it. So number 3 is the way you help people, especially if you have an A, mother tongue, and that person is working into a B, their acquired language. So that's about giving feedback. And also, this is a video that I recommend. It's about how to give feedback. So now let's move on to 4. How do you use? We've covered, listening, that you will give your interpretation and you will receive feedback from your colleague during this practice cycle. And then the question is, how are you going to use this feedback? And this is what they call deliberate practice. It's where you actually use what is given to you as feedback. This is crucial. You don't want to keep on practicing the same mistakes and not strengthen your weak points. So the whole idea is to identify your weak points, what I'm calling your challenge areas. So there are, again, two phases when you listen to the speech. Do you have some kind of weakness in the source language? Maybe there's a weakness in the way you are listening. Are you listening in an even way all the way through? You know, unlike the other delegates in any meeting, you know, they might chat with their colleagues, or they might be waiting for the thing that's really important, or they might be preparing what they want to say. We are listening absolutely all the time, right? If we miss something, we're in bad shape. We don't know what to say. So we have to have this constant, regular listening. We have to be analyzing. We have to think, well, that follows, or no, that doesn't follow. We need to be getting under the words. We can't just be staying at the surface on the words. So we need to learn whether we are actually following and understanding and analyzing. One of the main criticisms that the phrase we would often use when we were critiquing each other. I know this sounds like ancient history to many of you, I guess, but it was in about 1984. Manque d'analyse. Your problem is in the analysis. As an interpreter, you are analyzing, you are figuring out what's going on. And then there comes the part where you perform your speech. Are you having difficulty reading your notes? Again, this is part of the deliberate practice, right? The whole process by which you take in the feedback that your colleague is giving you, and you detect a trend. Hey, I've got a problem with that. I'm going to devise exercises and strengthen that. So maybe you're having a problem reading your notes. You're going to have to maybe take better notes, acquire some symbols, improve your handwriting, or whatever it is that's the problem there. You may have a problem remembering. Why? Generally speaking, it's because you're thinking about writing and not listening the way you normally would. Is your delivery smooth, credible, pleasant, and fast? It should be all of those things, and you should end up finishing the speech or that part of a speech in less time than the original took. And it's, on the other hand, I want to make sure that nobody thinks that this is a summary in any way. It's absolutely not a summary. You are going to put across 100%, or at least try to. We're human. We may make a mistake, but our goal is to do 100% of the entire speech. It's not a summary. Are we having a problem in our target language word choice or vocabulary? Do we need to work on that? So I also have a video on deliberate practice. Let's see if I can find that and put it in the chat for you. So there's a video here on deliberate practice, which is on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. So you can find that, and you can use the QR code to find it, or you can find it in the chat. So now we're going to move on to part 3. Part 3 is what I'm calling the glance layout. What you want to be able to do when you are doing consecutive with notes is to be able to glance down at your notes. Everything is in the proper place, and you remember what the guy was saying. You go, okay, I got it. I remember that part. And then you say it. That's the whole idea. You're not going to read off of your notes. The whole idea of consecutive with notes is actually in the listening part. It's if you listened and noted what was said, you will remember. And that comes with a practice anyway, but having it laid out in a nice way on the page is important. We're going to see why, as I said, we're calling that the glance layout. In the beginning, I said, please have a notepad ready. So we are going to be able to use that pretty soon. So do have your notepad ready. First of all, I'd like to say, okay, when we are generally writing, when a person is writing on a page or writing a letter, it usually looks something like this. There's absolutely no form. It's amorphous. It's just a way of putting the words one after the other in a way that's economical with the paper, right? So you can have a book that's only 100 pages long rather than 1,000 pages long. You get more words on the page. But in many professions, and I'm going to take a look at the accountant here as an example, they have a specific function, and so they have a specific layout for that function. So let's say that the accountant is now at the meeting and the CEO says, hey, our accountant, could you please tell us what is the amount for our treasury stock at cost? And the accountant is going to think, oh my goodness, okay, I've got to produce that quickly. It's not under the assets, it's under the equities. I got that. Okay, it's going to be down here somewhere. It's in the words. Okay, here. And the numbers are over here. Okay, it's thanks to the fact that he's got everything laid out in a manner that is specific to his needs that he's able to find it quickly. So that's for an accountant who can find that. Now, let's take a look at a cook. Sort of the same thing. You have a bunch of ingredients. You better figure that out first, right? You won't be able to cook anything. So it's all lined up on with the amounts and everything you need to buy or make sure you have it on. And then you have the directions step by step about how to do it. So for a cook, it's a specific layout. I want to see if, you know what, I probably forgot to, yeah, I'm sure I forgot to put the sound, but it doesn't matter. You'll see this is a race car. Kind of ruins it actually because you can't hear what he's saying. Anyway, he's talking really fast. And often I feel like when somebody's talking super fast, it's like we are driving a race car and we are barely able to make every turn. And when we don't listen, and that in other words, we don't know what to say, then we crash. And so we don't want to crash. And so this race car driver is going to be looking down at the dashboard. And let's say she looks and she says, okay, I've got the miles per hour on the left and I got the engine speed on the right. And I can see that, okay, in this image, it's a bit funny because it's on 0, but she can say, okay, I think I've got the right speed for this corner. Here we go. And then she can look up at the corner, etc. And so, but the good thing is that everything is in its place, right? If it were to not be in its place, she would look down and go, okay, wait a minute, I got to read this quickly here. RPM, right? That's the engine speed. I better look on the right. Now it's MPH. Got it. That's my speed. So since things were not in the proper place, she's having to pay a lot more attention to everything and figure out what is going on. Whereas when it's in the proper place, the place it's always been, the place that you've practiced, it's very helpful. Let's take a look at another example. When the postman is going to deliver a letter, okay, here we have the word recipient written there. So of course, the postman is going to be able to figure it out. It's going to Jane Doe, and it's being sent by the guy there, David Violet. Okay, he says, I've got it. I've figured it out. But it would be much better if it had a layout, right? So, oh, just glance at Jane Doe. I don't even have to think about it. I know it's going right there. And the postman doesn't want it to switch places because then it will go to the wrong place. You see how the layout is so important. So the question that I have for you today, and I'm going to supply the answer, is what is the specific layout for us as interpreters who are doing consecutive with notes? So let's take a look at that. And to do so, I'm going to take a look at one of Aesop's fables. It's about a dog. The dog had a delicious piece of meat in its mouth. As he crossed a river on a bridge, he saw below the reflection of a dog with a piece of meat in its mouth. And he tried to grab that meat with its teeth and only got water. The real meat fell and sank and was gone. And the dog remained hungry. Okay, so here we have a text. It's pretty simple, but we can see that if you are just going to glance at this and try to find out what is doing what to what, we see that the subjects, the what that is the doing the action, is all over the place. There's no structure whatsoever. It's just writing in the usual way to save paper. And the same thing with the verbs. What is the dog doing? We have the verbs that are left and right, middle, and all over the place, no rhyme or reason. So I want to say something now. I want to give credit to Denise Seleskovich, who I've already mentioned, but also Christopher Thierry, who is another of the giants of our profession. He's actually still alive. He's 95 years old. I ran into him in Paris, and there's a picture of us there 2 years ago. So they helped me to develop what I'm going to share with you. And I also would like to give credit to Andrew Gillis, who has an excellent book on this, and I recommend this book. And his book helped me to codify some of these things. And what they are, the things that I'm talking about are 6 elements. You need to break the message into parts, into ideas. Any complex thing is always best managed when you break it into manageable parts. You do need to do this, break it into ideas. Then isolate each idea from the following idea by using a horizontal line under each idea. Then there may be a connection between them, a logical or temporal connection, a link. So we will use links for that. 4, the SVO unit, that means the subject, verb, object units. You might want to switch those around if you think or you often work in a language that has a different order, which is quite possible, but don't switch it around all the time. Decide on what you will be using and use that from then on. Then we are going to look at virtual columns. In other words, we have things lined up in the page in a specific way, but it's a virtual column because it's not actually delineated with a line or anything, and our diagonal writing, which enables us to space things out and get sort of a skeleton, a backbone on which everything else can rest. Now let's take a look at another story, the ant and the grasshopper. Okay, I've got the first line in parentheses because we're going to say that happened on the page before this. And just listen to this story. The grasshopper played his fiddle, and consequently, he had no food. The ants gathered food. They stored a large amount because they feared the cold winter. So I'm going to show you how this might be expressed using what I called earlier the page layout. So the glance layout. So that we have the grasshopper played his fiddle. That's on the preceding page. And consequently, okay, that's a long word. We're going to use the word so as a link. And the link is off to the left in the margin. We'll be talking about that. And then we have the subject and the verb and the object. So here we have he had no food. And then the horizontal line, which will delineate that first idea and that first SVO unit. And then we have another SVO unit, which is the ants gathered food, and line under that. They stored a large amount, a line under that. Because, okay, we got a link there. The CA for me is a good symbol for because it actually, the word cause contains that. Anyway, CA is my symbol for because, and it's in the left margin. You see how there's a margin off here to the left. We'll be talking about a little more about that in a minute, but I've split the page in 2. You don't have to do that, but that's the way I learned. And then the left margin of each side of the page is where you put links. And then we have the rest of that sentence, because they feared the cold winter, with a line under that. So that is the page layout, the glance layout that I am going to recommend to you. And we can see, I'm going to show you now where each of these are, right? I showed you 6 items, 6 elements. We have the fact that we broke it into ideas first, so you can see that it's all broken into ideas. You got the 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 ideas, right? They're in a little box, and the box is basically contained by the page and by the lines that you put under. And here we can see the lines, and the line under the first one, under the second one, under the third one, and under the fourth one. So that's the horizontal line. And as we were going, right, I mentioned we got these links. We got the consequently, of course, we didn't write a long word like that. We found a nice short word, so, and also for because we found a nice short word. So there you have your links. And next, the SVO units, we've got those like that, right? We've got the whole story laid out in that skeleton. And then remember I said that you have columns. Look, the subject is always there. On the left, you glance down just like the race car driver and go, okay, got it. I can keep talking. I can keep speaking while I can engage the public and look them in the eyes, etc. So everything is in its place. You have these columns. You can see what is happening thanks to the fact that the columns are there, although you're not going to put those red lines in there. It's just to show you that today. And you see we've got the diagonal writing with the SVOs going down at a diagonal like that. So I want to show you a couple of other things because they will come up in our exercise and they're super useful. One of them is the recall line. And the idea here is that if you have something that's said twice, you don't want to have to write it again. So what we have is the grasshopper played his fiddle, so he had no food. And then we have the ants, right? The ants, and so we're going to put the ants in there. And the ants, they gathered food. But here we have in other words, the ants, they stored a large amount. That's going to go right here, right? So just use a line rather than write ants again or write the word they again. Use the line. And the same thing here, because they feared the cold. So we can use this line again. So since we have the same subject for all three of these ideas, we can just draw a line. And this is what we call the recall line. I'm going to show you also how I indicate the tense, the past, present, or future in notes. So let's use the verb go. We've got just a little mark right here. For me, because we are writing going towards the right side of the page, to me, the right is the future and the left is the past. So this shows that it's a past tense. And here it's in the middle. For me, that shows that it is the present tense. And here is on the right for me, that shows it is the future tense. And I always add that. I find it very, very useful to just not have to worry, okay, wait a minute, is this past, present, or I just know immediately because I got in the habit through hundreds of hours of practice. And that's another thing that I always emphasize of just throwing this little mark on there every time I write down a verb. Okay, so we covered the tense part. And now remember, we had this fable and we said that we will be doing an exercise. We're going to go back to the one about the dog and his reflection. So please now bring out your page and your pencil or pen and take some notes. You can try to implement the things that I have just indicated or do it your own way, but we are going to just take some notes on this very simple exercise and then take a look at how it might have been done using the glance layout that I just mentioned. So please start now. Here we go. Take your notes. A dog had a delicious piece of meat in its mouth. As he crossed a river on a bridge, he saw below the reflection of a dog with meat in its mouth. He tried to grab that meat in its teeth and only got water. The real meat fell and sank and was gone. The dog remained hungry. So, okay, now you've had a chance to take notes about this text right here. And we're going to take a look. This is a way I learned so many things. You know, even when I learned French, I would look at an English word, think, what's a good French word for that? I would write it down, and then I would have on my list the answer. And this is how I learned a lot of vocabulary. And in fact, that's how I did my spelling tests in school and stuff. So anyway, so that's sort of what we're doing here. I hope you have written something down as your notes, and now you're going to get a chance to see how I might have done it on the basis of the layout that I just explained to you. So we have the dog had, you see how I've indicated the verb in the middle, and it's going down a little bit, and it's got a past tense. Had a piece of meat. Another little technique is when you don't have time to write something like delicious, you underline it and just remember delicious. And so it's a way of emphasizing something. And in its mouth, I've abbreviated mouth this way. And then we have the horizontal line. And then as he crossed, and here we are talking about the dog again, right? So instead of writing dog or writing he or writing some other word, I'm just using the recall line to say it's the same thing as last time, that as he crossed the river, a little explanation here. I'm using a dash here because you will see that this is going to be two items in the same column, two items that form a list. And I've also got the past tense, as he crossed a river. And this is a way that is recommended to write abbreviations, first three letters or so, and the last letter or so in superscript. So cross the river on a bridge. I've just decided to use bridge that way. That's my abbreviation. And here we see we have another item in a list. I like to use these dashes to say we've got two things that are of the same order and they form a tiny list. You know, this might turn out to be 3 or 4 items down here. So he saw the reflection. Again, you see the same technique. First few letters, last letter in superscript. This, you're noticing now that we've got the slash several times. And what that is for is any kind of relationship that's not a verb between two things and you don't have time to write it down. So it's the reflection of, well, what do you know? It's something we've already written before, so we use the recall line and it says a reflection of the meat. So we finished that idea. Next idea. So now the speaker didn't say that, but in my opinion, it's allowed to analyze and say, okay, this is a consequence. He saw the reflection and that's why. So even though it's not in the original, I'm putting my notes. So the dog, again, we have the same subject, so recall line. So he tried, got the past tense, tried to bite. We've got two verbs, so they're stacked one on top of the other. Tried to bite. Hey, what do you know? We've already said that as well, the reflection. He tried to bite the reflection. For me, this is a way of saying but. Just the B, and it's in the left margin here. That's where we put the causal or temporal links. We put them in the margin off to the left. But it was just water. I decided that this would be enough, that I had understood, and it was pretty obvious. So I'm just using this note to say water. And here we have a recall line again. The real meat fell, that's the verb there. That's an arrow going down, showing something going down. The fell, we've got it in the past tense, and we have it as a list. So we know there's going to be another verb in this idea. Into the water, we don't have to write water again. We just can write a line. And was gone. It disappeared. And we write our line that will close off that idea. And I want to emphasize something here. Even though gone is a past participle, it's in the verb column, right? It's acting as a verb. Just like a symbol, you can write any word in here. It doesn't have to be, you know, a verb to denote a verb. Just like the arrow doesn't have to be a verb, and this past participle doesn't have to be a verb. It's a note. It's just there to remind you of something. And then, so we have the causal thing again. So the dog, using the recall line again, the dog remained, and I'm using something shorter than remain. I'm saying stayed, hungry, same system, first 3 letters, last letter in superscript, and that's the end of that idea. Okay, so that's how I am giving you an example of how you would implement all of the ideas that I gave you about how to do this glance layout. Just to re-explain everything that I was sort of saying, we are breaking it. Okay, this is the part again about how we broke it into ideas. We got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ideas, right? So the first part is break it into ideas. And we we did so simply by putting a line under each idea. So here is our horizontal line. And remember, just because you're at the end of the page doesn't mean you do not put the line. Do put the line, because if it's not there, it means that the idea continues to the next page. And then we also had the links, so we've pointed those out. As he was crossing the bridge, you could say that's sort of a temporal or link. And so he saw some food, and of course we're thinking, wow, he was hungry, he wanted to bite that. So we have all our causal links here pointed out, and then we move on to the SVO. I decided to do it this way, where you can see the skeleton over here. It mimics the structure. You see how, when we have two things in the same column, they form sort of a list. You know, it could have, if we had an object here, like let's say France, Germany, and Spain, we would have them also with those dashes. One of the reasons for those dashes is if you do not hear something, it is a way to have a placeholder saying, okay, there was a country here I didn't hear. Maybe I will figure it out later. And this way, with a dash, I know that there's something missing. So anyway, that's for the SVO. And then we've got our virtual columns, right? So we got the verbs are off to the left. The subjects are off to the left. The verbs are in the middle, and the objects are off to the right in each of these cases, right? So we've applied everything we said. Obviously, I had days and days to do this for you, and your notes, even when I'm taking notes spontaneously from a speech, I don't do it perfectly like this, okay? I'm just showing you how it's done. And then diagonal, okay? So it's going down diagonally like that. And there we have it. So we have covered everything. We've covered this method, what happens when we actually interpret. We talked about the practice cycle, which is crucial to get that feedback, work with someone. That's really how I learned how to be an interpreter. Obviously, there's so many other things you have to do. You know, you have to really brush up on your languages. You have to do translation, do sight translation, do summaries, etc. There's so many exercises you can do to improve your mental gymnastics with language. But this is really the crux, this practicing with another student or another interpreter, in my opinion. And I also showed you the glance layout. Now, I have promised you a little prize at the end. I'm going to offer you a 30% off on my course, which is a course with 20 modules. It's about 5 hours of video. It's got quizzes and about 25 exercises. It's a course that you can take at your own pace. Once you purchase it, you have unlimited viewing, and you can actually download the 20 or so videos, and you have a 30-day money-back guarantee. And it's actually going to be at a reduced price if you use the I'm going to put these in the chat. I'm going to put this all in the chat. So you will have a coupon actually that will take it down from $397 to $277. And then very important, we also are going to launch again, because we've been doing this for about 2 years. We're going to launch our practice sessions, which are New York time, Friday at 9 p.m. in the evening and Saturday at noon. And for an hour and a half, we get together and practice. And we do one interpretation all in the big group, where we sort of do a demonstration like we're doing today very quickly. And then we go into breakout sessions and try to get in about 3 practice sessions where you get to, again, write notes and get feedback from your colleagues. So that's weekly practice where you can sign up, and I will put that in the chat. So I think that I have finished, aside from putting everything in the chat. And as I promised, I would present for about 45 minutes.